portrait and the figure. This week I want to talk to you about proportions and the proportions that we see within our face and also within our body. The first thing I want to say about them is that we have to keep them in the context that these are the classical proportions given to us by the Greeks and the Romans. It was them striving for an ideal of the human form, the perfection of the human form. And as much as we might like to think that we are as perfect as we think we are, these proportions only really are presented in a very small fraction of the human population. In terms of then their usefulness, that's where I don't want to go into any great amount of detail with them. They are then, I think, only useful up to a point as a way of maybe checking yourself in terms of understanding where things should be roughly. And also in our process of observation when we're looking at maybe a portrait or a figure and using them as a basis to look for the difference. So the classic one that I would talk about is the bottom of the nose here being between the eyebrow here and the bottom of the chin here. Now in classical antiquity that should be halfway, but in some people you'll find that it's above the halfway or below the halfway, so that when you're looking at someone you can be saying to yourself, well, between there and there the bottom of the nose is halfway, visually looking and seeing if it is halfway or not, or above or below that halfway point, so that then when you go to draw it or paint it you can be then maybe roughly putting it in the right position. The other important thing to keep in mind about these proportions is their relationship to the golden section. So you will see, particularly when I start to divide up the shape, some of those numbers appear that we associate with the golden section, 3s and 5s, etc., 8. So remember, the easiest way of finding the golden section is to divide any space up into 8 equal parts. And where there's 3 parts and 5 parts meeting, that is roughly the approximate position of the golden section. If you want to look at any more about the golden section, look back into some of the other videos that I've done earlier on, and there are a couple of videos there that further explain the aspects of the golden section and of the observation of them in nature. Let's start to have a look at the proportions of the face. To begin with, we're going to look at some of the divisions of the face. So to begin with, I'm just going to draw a basic ovoid shape, and we're looking here as the crown, the top of the head, and the chin barrel down here as being the base. Halfway between those two is the brow line. The brow line is the line, it doesn't go through your eyes, it travels along the base of the protrusion above your eye sockets. It runs through that part of the nose, your bridge of your nose, that piece that sits back. So there's the brow line. Halfway between the brow line and the chin barrel is the bottom of the nose, that position there. As always with the face, there is an element of the golden section that we have to be aware of. And the first one in these horizontals is the position between the bottom of the nose and the chin barrel, which is the position of the mouth, which is on the golden section between the bottom of the nose and the chin barrel. The other main horizontal is halfway again between the brow line and the top of the head, and that's the natural hairline up there. Then we have our horizontal, then we have our then we have our vertical divisions. So the first main vertical division that we need to take account for is the width of the head. This is excluding the ears, which we'll come back to. So we're basically, we're looking at that division from here to here, and it ends up being about 5 eyes wide. So there is one eye in between those marks, 2 eyes. So there's an eye width in between and an eye width from either side. If we draw some lines straight down on that middle line, that gives us the width of the nose, like so. If we think about roughly where the pupils would be, which will be roughly the centre of each of those, and again, draw some lines straight down from the pupils, that gives us the width of the mouth to those dark points on either side. The last one we need to take account for is the ear, and the ear lines up with the bottom of the nose, and the helix, the top part of the ear, goes just over the brow line, like so, and fits in. I'll give him, looks a bit strange, but it gives you an idea. Now those measurements, if we're to look on the face in profile, continue across. So that brow line running there, give you a bit more of a prominent nose. The bottom of the nose, position of the mouth, etc., etc. The last one we need to take into consideration is the position of the back of the ear, which is if we take the distance from the chin barrel to here and go back, so that we end up with a triangle essentially, gives us the position of the back of the ear. The other set of proportions that we should talk about are the proportions then of the figure. And this is all very approximate, but this becomes really important for maybe doing those gestural drawings that you may then include in a landscape and whatnot, because there's nothing worse than maybe doing some of those and that the proportions of them are out in terms of maybe the head and then the body being very short, or a very small head on a very long body type sort of thing. That doesn't look quite right. So this is where that knowledge of maybe that the adult male, to begin with, is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We could add one up there. 6, 7, 8 heads high. The female adult is between 7, 7.5 heads high. So there's our sort of overall height. So if we start with that head as being the next major stepping stone, if we come down to that 3-5 mark there. There is the belly button as a major point to take note of. And there is those. There is the bottom of the feet. Kneecaps just above here. Yes, that goes to there. Hips. Chest. And arms. You can see there, it's just a sort of a basic masses that I've drawn that as a sort of a basic skeleton type sort of shape. But you can see how that there's key points. Now, as I said, the belly button there on a golden section of 3 and 5. If we run back the other way, 3 and 5 parts there, is it gives us the tips of those, the tips of the finger there. So you can see our arms, if we were to put this arm out, that there has to be then a relationship between the shoulders to here. So I know that if we put the arm out completely like that, is that you've got that same sort of, it's this distance from here to here is the same as this distance from here to here. And again, that we've got a 5 and a 3, and back the other way is 5 from here to 3 over to here. Rather, I mean, I could go on and on and on about a whole lot of divisions within the figure. But the main thing I would talk to you about is observation of the shoulder and the hip line, in terms of that they have the greatest impact on that idea of balance, of the figure, and movement within the figure. So when it comes back to drawing maybe some of those little gestural numbers, as I said before, is that if there's a head, and if it's an adult, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, we need to be making sure that there's something that looks roughly 8 heads high. So this week's exercise, what I want you to do is I'm going to send you links to 3 different paintings that I want you to do a copy of. Now, each of these paintings has a figure in them, and having a little bit of an awareness of some of these measurements and these proportions may help you in terms of getting some of the proportions correct of the shapes and the positions of some of those shapes and how they relate to one another correct. I haven't given you, as I said, every single proportion that I possibly could, simply because if you start to rely on those proportions, you will start to not look anymore at what, because you'll start to go into that mindset of, oh, well, that should be there because the rules say it should be. As I said in the beginning, is that these relationships of these proportions are the classic or the classical proportions. They come from antiquity. They were the idea of the perfect person. We don't fit these criteria, not many of us anyway. So to use them more as a guide rather than an absolute truth. They help you when you're maybe not quite sure, be able to come back to these and say, well, that's roughly where it should be. And as I said at the very beginning, these are more to then look for the difference to these proportions when you're looking at someone's face. I will give you, as I said, the 3 paintings to look at. You can work these in pencil, just in black and white, or by all means, if you want to be using a bit of colour with paint, you may. But if you do work just in black and white with them, don't make the painting, the original painting that you're looking at, black and white and copy it from that. Try and use it in colour and observe those shapes and tones and try to then translate them into what they are in terms of black and white. Try and set yourself up in a similar way to how we've been painting Florence, and when you've been setting yourself up with the pictures of Florence, of them side by side, your piece that you're working on, the reference material, observe them from a distance, come up, make some marks, paint down some areas, block out some areas with charcoal, whatever medium that you're using, then stand back and make a comparison one to the other. So slowly work towards getting it right rather than getting it right the first time. As always, good luck, and I shall see you in Zoom.